Welcome to your first lesson for Algebra 2. For this lesson, we're going to be starting pretty simple. Some things that you already know. This is the lesson for Thursday, August 27th. We're going to start with just some evaluating, which we'll talk about in a moment, and some order of operations. So what we're looking at then is order of operations, and I have GEMDIS. Some people say PEMDAS, and they have a P there, which stands for parentheses. But I don't use parentheses as my first one. It's actually groupings of all types should come first. Parentheses are one type of grouping, but there are other types of groupings that you can use. So I have a G there first. And we should all know order of operations at this point. And we're going to use our order of operations to do some evaluating. Now in this class, you're going to see some things that look a little funny. We're starting to learn the language of math here, and some more higher level notations, if you will. But the concept today should be fairly basic. Our first definition is, what does it mean to evaluate? To evaluate means to calculate the value of something. First example, Amy wants to build a box-shaped shelter in her backyard for her pet rabbits. She needs to know how much paint to buy to cover the outside of the box. She's going to paint all 6 sides. So obviously there's some wire caging. Maybe the box has covers that come down and protect them. Something like that. But anyways, there are 6 faces around this box, this rectangular prism, that they are going to be painting. So what we're looking at then is using surface area of a rectangular prism. So surface area of a rectangular prism. Prism looks like this. Here's a rectangle. It has depth to it. And it has 6 different faces. Length times width, which is the bottom and top of the box. Height times length, and that's this front face and the back face. And width times height, which is the side faces. This side and then the left side that we can't see. So I have one of each of them. Length times width, height times length, width times height. But there's 2 of them because there's ones in the backs that we can't see, which is why the formula is multiplied by 2. Great, so we have a nice little formula here. And what we're asked to do with it is evaluate the formula that we were given, given the fact that the length of it's going to be 6 feet, the width is 3, and the height is 5. Now you did this in geometry. You took formulas, you plugged in numbers, and you came up with an answer. That's evaluating. And it's also using order of operations. So I'm going to plug in for every single length. So there's 2 lengths. There's an L here and an L here in the formula. I'm going to plug 6 in. For width, here and here, I'm going to plug 3 in. For height, I'm going to plug 5 in. So it's 2 times 6 times 3 plus 5 times 6 plus 3 times 5. All right, order of operations. We start with groupings, which means I have to start by working inside this parenthesis grouping. Now, inside of it, there's no exponents, so I'm going to skip that step. I can multiply, so I'm going to multiply 6 times 3, 5 times 6, and 3 times 5, 15. Now that I've done multiplication, now I'm ready for addition. Again, still working inside the parentheses. So I'm going to add those together, and I would get 48 combining these 2 together, plus 15 more, takes me to 63. And then I'm going to multiply by 2. So see, all of that was happening inside the parentheses. I was following order of operations inside parentheses. So now that I'm done with my parentheses, I'm going to multiply. Again, there's no exponents here, so I'm skipping that step. Now I'm ready to multiply. 63 times 2 is 126, and that's feet squared, or square feet. And that's the area. Okay, so you've done that before. That's not something that's necessarily new to most of you, but you got to understand that that is evaluating an order of operations. Let's do another one. This time we're going to take it out of the context of geometry, and we're going to go to looking at something called function notation, more algebra based. So function notation is something that looks like this. F of x. And that does not mean f times x. That's notation that just says f of x means that we have a function. We're calling the function f. So f is its name. And the x in parentheses means that it uses the variable x inside of it. So you're not going to do any math with this. This is just a label. It's called f, and it uses the letter x. The function itself is this algebraic expression. Okay, so then our example for evaluating with function notation says if f of x equals this, find the value of f of negative 5. Well, f of negative 5, I just realized I'm missing a negative there. F of negative 5 tells me to evaluate the function when x equals negative 5. Because you see here, x is in the parentheses with f, and in what we're asked to find, negative 5 is in parentheses with f. And all that means is put negative 5 in place of x. You're going to, in other words, substitute negative 5 in for x. So 3x squared. Well, I know that f negative 5 means that I need negative 5 in that x spot. I do have another x, so this second x also should be negative 5. So now I'm evaluating f of negative 5. F of negative 5 is the same expression, only negative 5 has taken the place of x. Okay, so now we're ready to simplify by following order of operations. So I'm taking this expression, 3 times negative 5 squared, minus 4 times negative 5 plus 2. And I'm going to start with groupings, which is my parentheses. So I'm going to rewrite this as 3 times negative 5 squared minus 4 times negative 5 plus 2 is negative 3. All right, now we're ready for exponents next. So I'm going to take this and say, all right, negative 5 squared. Well, negative 5 times negative 5 is positive 25. Two negatives make a positive. So that's 25. Now I'm ready for multiplication. 3 times 25 is 75. Minus 4 times negative 3. A minus and a negative. Two negatives multiplied would turn that into a plus. Keep an eye on your negative sign. So that's plus 12, which then gives me 87. So that means f of negative 5, for this f function, f of negative 5 would equal 87. Okay. Now we're going to take a look at one more aspect of this, as soon as I find it. There are instances where we are going to use no numbers, but we're going to use variables with other variables. So example 3 is going to harken back to example 1's formula, the surface area that we just did. But what happens if they want to make the height of the box exactly the same as the length, so that the front of it is a square? So in that case, h is equal to L. So I'm still going to evaluate. I'm still going to put something in for something. Like in the last problem, we put negative 5 in for x. But I'm going to take a variable h out, and since h equals L, I'm going to put L in place of h. So I'm still evaluating, but I'm evaluating using another variable. So now let's simplify this one. What I have is LW plus L times L, anything times itself is squared, plus WL. Well, LW and WL are the exact same thing. So I'm going to add those together. I have one LW plus another LW, so that's two LWs plus L squared. And knowing some algebra, I could go a little further. I could multiply 2 times 2 and make 4LW, and even distribute the 2 into this term and make 2L squared. And now I have a formula for the surface area of a box where the height and length are the same. And we've written a new formula. And a lot of that is what algebra is really about, not just the numbers. We're at the 10-minute mark, so I'm going to wrap this up here very, very quickly. We can do the same thing with example 2, using letters instead of numbers. Same formula as example 2, but I want to find f of c. I read that as f of c. So what is that telling you? That tells you I don't want x in the formula. I want c in the formula. Okay, let me take that exact same formula, and instead of putting x there, I'm going to put c where x was. Now I have the same formula, only it's using the letter c instead of the letter x. And you will see that sometimes in math, and it's a pretty easy concept here, and that's it. Hopefully you took good notes as you're going through this. If you are watching this during the live session, now would be the time to get back into the Google Meet.